Hi everyone, it's Kristie here from KP Creatives with another video for Two Scrapbook Friends. And today we are going to be doing some ink blending and creating some cards using one of my favorite new stamp sets, which is the Hey Hello Hi stamp and die set from Photoplay in their Say It With Stamp series. It is a fantastic stamp and die set, and I hope you will take a look at it and love it as much as I do. I think it is just awesome. So here's the list of supplies we're going to be using today. I will pop this up again at the end of the video so you can take a screenshot if you would like to build your shopping list. So we have quite a bit going on today in terms of ink. So I'm going to take you through what that is going to look like. We're going to be using some white pigment ink. The one that I have on hand is Hero Art's Unicorn White. This is a fantastic white pigment ink. It also comes with a re-inker. You can purchase the re-inker with it. It is fantastic. I highly recommend this. Even if you are embossing things in white, it is a great way to emboss, especially sentiments first. Sometimes when you're embossing on white, especially on darker colored cardstock, sometimes you can get a couple spots that you miss with the embossing powder. But if you use the white pigment ink as your embossing ink, you have white already on your cardstock and you don't notice that as much. So highly recommend having this as a white pigment ink in your collection. I also off camera stamped my sentiments using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, a great all-purpose black ink. Again, this is a pigment ink, so it does take a little bit longer to dry, but it is excellent, really crisp and great results with this ink. And we're going to be doing some blending with Distress Oxides, and I've chosen green. I know sometimes people have a hard time at creating masculine cards or cards that are more gender neutral. Sometimes there's a lot of flowers and florals and things like that, and sometimes we're looking for more neutral type cards. So this card design is going to fit that bill for you. So I've chosen this great trio of greens to do some ink blending with. So I've got Bundled Sage, Iced Spruce, and Rustic Wilderness. So Bundled Sage and Iced Spruce have been around for a while. Rustic Wilderness is one of the new-ish Distress Oxides that have been released as part of the latest collection. So you will see those in action blending. We've got a few different kinds of paper on the go today. I have some Bristol Smooth cardstock. The size of this right now, it doesn't really matter too much. It is 4x4, but we're going to cut this down to 3x3. So just have, a piece that's at least 3x3 basically is what you're going to need. I think a little bit bigger is easier because we're going to cut it down. So I like to start with a piece that's about 4x4. And again, that's the Bristol Smooth. Use whatever paper you like for ink blending. Ink blending, is one of those things, like the paper really matters. If you haven't had a chance to try the Bristol Smooth to ink blend on, give it a whirl. It is great. I also like to ink blend on the Nina 80 pound, but for best results, especially with the blender brushes, I find the Bristol Smooth is pretty foolproof. It's awesome. For our card base, we're going to use a piece of the Nina 110 pound Classic Crest Solar White. I have cut this. It is 8 inches tall by 4 inches across. I've scored that at 4 inches, and we'll use that as a nice heavyweight card base for our project today. The stamps that we're going to be using, I love this stamp set from the Stamp Market. It is called Gingham and Greetings, and we're going to be using this great plaid. We're actually going to stamp that right over top of our ink blended panel, so you'll see that in action. And then again, this great set from Photoplay. Here is the stamp set. You've got those really nice hey, hi, hello, and some great sentiments. In this set, you also get the coordinating dies with the shadow as well as the words themselves. We're just going to use the words themselves today, and I did the die cutting and stamping off camera, but you'll see what that looks like. So you get to take a look at those. And then to cut out the sentiments from that Photoplay set, I used my message strip dies from the message strip set from Hero Art. So this set comes with the dies that you see here and this set of great all-purpose sentiments. Excellent set to have in your collection. Highly recommend having sets like this, especially the ones that come with the coordinating dies to cut out those sentiments, because it can be a little tricky sometimes, and often that's the last piece of your project that you're working on. So you want to make sure that you're getting it right. So if you don't have a set of the sentiment label dies or message strip dies or anything like that, this Hero Art set is a great investment. Okay, so we've got our regular set of tools. The only other thing that I am going to put onto this card is some gems from Pink Fresh Studio. These are the Glacier Jewels, and I love these, and you'll see through a couple of the samples that I made. One of the really cool things about this set of gems is they pick up different colors. So you'll get to see that, and I think you'll really like how they look on the finished card projects. So let's get started with our ink blending. We're gonna get into the Distress Oxides here. So we've got our Bundled Sage, Iced Spruce, and Rustic Wilderness. I'm gonna use a couple of the blending brushes from Tailored Expressions. I'm gonna use the green for Bundled Sage and Rustic Wilderness, and I'm gonna use the gray one for Iced Spruce. And I'm just gonna grab a piece of paper towel so that I can rub off some of the excess as we are going through the blending process here. So let's start by loading up our brush with that Bundled Sage. And we're gonna go right in direct to the paper here. And again, this is the Bristol Smooth. So you can see how, like, you get no harsh lines. None. It's just incredible paper. And you know, with ink blending, sometimes you think, oh, I don't want to get too much ink on the paper. I think what I have learned with using this paper specifically is the more ink you have down, sometimes the easier it is to blend. So don't be shy. And the other thing to note about ink blending, especially if you're doing things like 3 colors on a panel, is to go down quite far with your first color. It really does tend to make the blend go a little bit more smooth. So stick with me as we get going on this blend here. I'm going to stop here with the Bundled Sage. We might come in again after, but I'm going to move on to Iced Spruce. Load up my brush, just going to tap that off. And we're gonna go right in. And Iced Spruce is a really great color because it has different undertones in it of different colors. You can see the grays, we'll pick up some green, also some blues. So really a versatile one to have in your collection. So just working through this blend from the Bundled Sage to Iced Spruce, and then we're gonna get into the Rustic Wilderness just at the bottom here. So I'm going to turn this piece of the Bristol Smooth, and you can grab a Post-it note if you have one. That's what I have, so I'm going to grab that here. You could also use just a piece of scrap paper just to protect your fingertips, because if you're new to Distress Oxides, or you just are like me and you need the constant reminder, even though you use them all the time, they take longer to dry. So if I put my fingertips on this right now to hold the paper in place, my fingerprints are going to be on my project, which I don't want. So I've got this nice sticky, the extra sticky Post-it note. I can pop that right down and I don't have to worry about getting the project mucked up with my fingers. So now I'm going into this nice, luxurious dark green with that Rustic Wilderness, and wait till you see this color. Like, oh, and look at that. Like, look at the saturation of the color onto the project, onto the paper. I love it. These oxides are just awesome. So we've got some nice rich green there coming up, and I'm gonna have to go back in with that Iced Spruce because it's disappeared a little bit. So we're gonna go back in and take this through the middle again. There we go. That Iced Spruce coming through. Looks great. And I'm gonna turn again, just checking the Post-it, make sure there's no ink right on it because I don't want to get the ink on this side of the panel that we're working on. So again, I'm still working through with that iced spruce, just bringing it up so it doesn't get totally lost. And then, since we had the rustic wilderness and the bundled sage on this green brush, I'm going to just rub off the rustic wilderness onto the piece of paper towel because I want to go back in with the bundled sage. But I know that if I went to that right now, it's just going to be overtaken by the rustic wilderness. So if you've got a piece of paper towel, you can just rub that ink off. Or if you had another piece of the Bristol right close to you, you could very easily just blend on that panel. So you're getting kind of 2 for 1 there. So we've got lots of that green on here. There we go. I think that's probably good enough to be able to pick up more of this bundled sage. So we're going to go in one more time. Just pump this up a little bit at the end to bring a bit of that lightness into the top part of the panel. Okay, so here is our finished ink blend. So we have bundled sage, ice spruce, and rustic wilderness. Now, again, with the distress oxides, you want to make sure you're giving them time to dry. If we were to stamp on top of this right now, it would not turn out so great because the oxides are a blend of dye and pigment and they take longer to dry. So if you are in a hurry, hit this with your heat tool and then get set for the rest of your project. Whether you're stamping on it, embossing on it, whatever the case might be, you really want to make sure it's nice and dry. I'm not sure if the light's picking it up, but it is still pretty wet right now. And you can see especially through this section, it's still quite wet. So I'm going to set this aside. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to show you another one. So this panel on the right here, this is one that I did earlier. So it's nice and dry. So you can see very similar color pattern here from the light to the dark green. And I'm just going to set the wet one off to the side so that it can continue to dry. And we're going to work off of the dry one here. So before we do that, I'm going to grab a wipe just to clean off my media mat, so I don't turn absolutely everything green for this project because we don't want that either. We just want the green on that nice panel. So I'm going to set the oxides off to the side and bring in the Misty. So this is where we're going to use that great plaid stamp from the Gingham and Greeting set from the Stamp Market. So I'm going to get my Misty set up here, get my dry panel into the corner of the Misty, and I'm going to put the magnet right on the corner because I want to be able to stamp that plaid pattern just in a way where I can cut it down, because on our finished card, we're only going to have the part that's stamped. So the rest of the green panel that's blended on, we're going to cut that away. So what we will do is move the Misty over here, and I'm going to bring in the unicorn white ink from Hero Arts. I'm going to show you an example at the end of this video where I also used black pigment ink on this, and it does create a little bit of a different look, so you can see both types of results. So this is nice and juicy. I'm going to close that down right onto the ink blended panel. I'm going to bring in the smusher tool from Maker Forte so we've got nice even pressure as we stamp that down onto our panel. And let's take a look. It's just sticking a little bit there. And we got a pretty good first impression. So the stamp didn't totally hit that top corner, most likely just because of the magnet. So I'm actually not gonna ink it up again. I'm just gonna take the stamp, bring in the smusher tool again, and let's see if we got that top corner. And we did. Perfect. So I really like this look because it is pretty rustic with that stamp. And I really like the result of the plaid pattern over top of an ink blended panel. So one thing to keep in mind with pigment ink, which that unicorn white ink is a pigment ink, is just like the Distress Oxides, and just like the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, it takes a while to dry. So what I'm going to do is close up, actually one more thing before I close up the Misty. When you are inking on an ink blended panel like we just did, and I hope this is picking up in the video, just let me get a piece of white behind here so hopefully you can see it better. You can see that even though our panel was nice and dry, some of the color has been picked up on the stamp. So before you ink this stamp up again, if you wanted to double stamp it with that white ink, you want to make sure you're cleaning the stamp off nice and well with your stamp chamois, stamp cleaner, whatever tool you have in your collection, because if you don't, you're going to transfer that color onto your white ink pad and you're not going to be able to use it as long. So just remember that if you're going to double stamp it, you want to clean this off first and then go back and double stamp on your project. I really like the look that we got, so I am not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as is. But because it is a pigment ink, I'm going to grab my heat tool. Sorry for the noise. I'm going to get it nice and hot, and then I'm going to just run it over this white part so that it dries for us. And we can move on to the next part of the project. So get this nice and dry. And again, if you aren't in a hurry and you wanted to do a few of these, you could just let it air dry. That's totally fine. But you definitely don't want to go in and start cutting this down or anything like that, because it does stay wet quite long. And that's why it's a really nice white pigment ink to use if you are embossing with white embossing powder. I really love to do that. I find that I get really nice results that way, and I don't have kind of splotchy results with my embossing. Okay, so that looks great. Now we're going to bring in our paper trimmer and cut this down so that we're only getting the part that is stamped. So I'm just going in. I can see just under the trimmer guard that I'm right at the edge of the white pigment ink. So I'm going to make my first cut. And that looks great. Now I'm going to turn, and I can then line up the the white pigment ink exactly with the guard. And make the next cut. And it will end up being 3 inches by 3 inches. So now that I've done the two sides, I can just line up at 3 inches. And one more cut for 3 inches on this side. And I think I got a bit of a weird angle on one of these cuts here, so I'm just gonna check that. Make sure it's nice and square. And that looks great. So we've got our little plaid panel that we can start to build on our card. Now I did do another one of these just so you can see kind of the different results you can get, but it's a really cool way to make some neat panels for your cards. And then of course you can dress this up with any kind of sentiment that you'd like. So I can actually see this one still is a bit tacky in a couple of areas, so I'm going to use this other panel that's been dried for a little bit longer, just so we don't have any mishaps as we're working through putting the rest of the card together. So I'm going to grab my Lawn Fawn liquid glue, and as I mentioned, I did pre-stamp and die cut off camera some sentiments from that photo play Hey Hello Hi stamp set. Now the die cuts for the words, I die cut this out of the Nina Classic Crest 110 pound Solar White cardstock because I wanted some sentiments with some nice dimension. So this was die cut 3 times out of the 110 pound Nina, and then glued together using the Lawn Fawn liquid glue. And then these sentiments, I used the Nina 80 pound, and we're just going to glue those directly to the card. So I think for this one, I'm going to use A Note to Say Hello. And we're going to weight this just in the bottom corner. Do I want to do that? Let's see here. Actually, I think I'm going to change my mind and we're going to go with, hey, sending you happy vibes. And we'll pop it down on this corner of the card. I think that'll be great. So let's get the sentiment strip ready to go here. Liquid glue all set on that. And we're just gonna make sure this is right up against the edge of the left side of the card. And again, if you're using the Lawn Fawn liquid glue, the Gina K liquid glue, they dry clear. So if you get a little bit seeping out of the edge, it's totally okay. It will dry clear and no one will ever know. So now we're gonna get the hey, and I think we'll put the hey close to the middle, just over top of that, a little bit, just covering that tag there. So again, this liquid glue is fantastic because it has a pretty fine tip and you can get some nice just little dots or little streams of glue onto sentiment die cuts like this without getting huge gobs of glue everywhere, which is pretty handy. So we've got the hay taken care of. Gonna let that just touch on the edge of that flag and give that a nice press. Okay, so we're going to set these other sentiments off to the side to use for a future project. That's something, I like to do if I'm not feeling super creative. I really like to take some time to do some die cutting or stamp some sentiments just in black or white or just silver embossing, something like that. And it really, it's kind of mindless mindless hobbying, and you don't really have to think about it. So it is nice to do that if you're not feeling your creative juices aren't quite flowing. Give that a try, just to spend some time in your whatever craft space you have, and it can kind of get the mind flowing in a different way, and you can learn new things, which is always fun. So I'm going to grab some of those Glacier Jewels from Pink Fresh Studio, and we're going to put them down on our project. I'm using this jewel pick tool from Maker Forte. It is my favorite jewel pick tool. It is just awesome. I'm going to get a couple of dabs of the liquid glue down on the project here. We're going to go with a trio of 3 of these Glacier gems. Now I'm going to just take a moment and let that glue set for just a few seconds. Sometimes if you go in right away with your gems or your sequins, you'll find they start to slip all over the place. Just give it a couple seconds for that glue to set up, and you will notice a difference in the tackiness of the glue and how well your sequins or your gems are going to stick. So we're going to grab this one here. And again, this glue dries clear, so a little bit of it's seeping out. Not worried about it. There we go. I'm going to get these sequins back in the little pouch. Yep, that's the other thing I really like about these Pink Fresh sequins. They come in this little pouch that has its own little closure, so it's great. They're not going to fly all over the place. I'm sure we've all had that experience where you would do just what I did and it's not closed and they go flying all over. So this this little package is really nice to not have that happen to you. So last step here, we're going to grab some foam tape and pop up this panel onto our finished card. We're going to get 3 strips of foam tape here. If you don't have foam tape, you could use foam squares, or you could just adhere this right to the card panel. Totally up to you, depending on how much dimension you like on your cards. You could just, like I said, you could adhere that right to the card panel, whatever you like. So I'm gonna grab the release paper off the back, and we're gonna put a little bit of liquid glue on this foam tape just to give ourselves some wiggle room when we pop this down on the card front, so that we can press down with confidence and we can wiggle it around a little bit if we need to, just in case it's not totally straight. So I'm going to bring in my secret weapon ruler here, and I'm going to come in 1/2 inch from the top and 1/2 inch from the left-hand side, and line that up right against the ruler. Take a look, that looks great, and we're going to press down with confidence onto that little panel. And there we have our finished project for today. So I wanted to share this one with you guys because if you are starting out ink blending, sometimes it can be frustrating. You might find, oh, I didn't get quite the blend that I wanted. Do not throw those panels out. You can stencil on top of them. You can use stamps like this Gingham stamp on top of them, and they really change the look of the background. So I'm going to show you a few more that I used with this basic card design, just so you can see how different the blends can look. So this one, I used seedless preserves and prize ribbon, and I didn't totally love parts of this blend, so I thought, oh, what can I do to, save parts of this card? And again, just stamping that down with that white pigment ink really brought this card to life, and I loved that on this panel. Then I did a blend of picked raspberry, aged mahogany, and ground espresso. All the blends are using distress oxides, and I really like how this one turned out. I love aged mahogany. It is a great distress oxide color. It goes with a lot of different things in the collection, so if you have that one, play around with it with some of the ink blends. Now this next one, I used some blues. So I used Speckled Egg, which is on this side. Then I went to Stormy Sky and Prize Ribbon. So just taking the blue colors there. And again, all of the stamps and sentiments are from that Hey Hello Hi from Photoplay. And this last example is the same blend of the picked raspberry, aged mahogany, and ground espresso, but instead of inking the Gingham stamp up in the white pigment ink, I inked it up in black pigment ink. So I just wanted to show you the difference there. And one thing that I think is really cool is look how those Pink Fresh Studio Glacier gems pick up different colors from all of these different projects. They look a little bit different on each one, even though it's exactly the same jewels that we're using. So I hope that gives you some inspiration to try out some different things with your ink blending, and definitely check out this Hey Hello Hi stamp set from Photoplay. It is awesome. It's a great one to have in your collection, and I hope that you'll take a few minutes to check it out on the website and maybe add it to the collection that you have for great all-purpose stamping. I think it's a lot of fun, and I really love the font for the Hey Hello and Hi with the die cuts. So if you have a moment, please take a second to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You'll get notified when we post new videos. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.